All right, we're going to cover Cruel Necessity. This is a Victory Point games from the States of Siege. And one of the first things that I noticed, this is noticeable. It came in a big old box. This is, right away begins to question, it begins to change, some of the opinions that I've always had about Victory Point games. These sort of, most of the games come in a little folder, a little folio type stock. But here, it really feels like they've put out something, even if it could have fitted a folio in a lot of ways, a big move forward with the thicker counters. This is with the laser cutting counter cutter. It was kind of cute. Apparently a few people have complained there's a little bit of smudging on some of the counters. You can see some kind of burn marks here that show up on the sheet. I don't know if that's very visible, but there's a little bit of a sight there, and I guess that goes to some of the counters. They provide you with this napkin, kind of a snarky thing on here. Hey, use this to wipe your counters. Paper napkin. But, really, for the most part, that's all you need. You might get some discoloration, though, that won't come off. And I think that's what people are really most upset about. I actually kind of like the way they look with the blackened edges around there. My wife really likes them. But there you have it. This is a game that also comes with a number of different decks of cards, quite a few cards. And let's see what else we have here. Oh, a bunch of counters. You're going to be handling combat using these. It's got its own little battle board that runs over here. Some of the cards are only for battle. Its own little sequence for that. But the main of the game is going to be played on the board of England. You're not moving pieces around so much as you're projecting your in this case it's going to be Zeal points, but essentially your activity points of whatever type, into trying to get these tracks up higher. But you'll also have to cope with the threat of the military threat from 4 armies that come from Scotland, the North, Wales, and in Ireland. You've got these different fortifications in the game. If they're blue, that's good. That means you control them currently. If they're red, that means the other your enemy controls them. This is a solo game, of course. All the States of Siege are solo. I actually usually don't pre-play games in the sense that a matter of time, a matter of my wife is my main opponent and she's not really that much into playing many things, whatever. But in this case, I'm very happy that I did for a few reasons. One of them is, it is a solo game. And we sat down and played it together as kind of, not really totally, both playing the same person. Not really like a co-op game, but like 2 people cooperatively playing a solo game. That's, for me, the best way to play a solo game. I don't really enjoy playing them alone. But we'll see how it goes. With the video, it'll probably enhance my experience a little bit here. Just sharing the story a little bit more, maybe. I don't know. But also because the rulebook, oh man, they go out of their way at Victory Point games to apply certain pedagogical principles. For example, pre-highlighting all your text and lots of color. Well, to me, it makes this actually almost unreadable. I mean, I cannot read or when I sit down to try to read the rules, I can't read them. And when I try to find stuff, all I see is this blur of colors. It totally distracts me from being able to discover what I need. It's just a matter of, different people have different styles of learning. And if I wanted to highlight things in my book, especially, I never highlight anything in a book. I might make notes in a margin or something like that. Rule books, I'm a lot more, because I have to, use them more. I treat them more as a technical manual or something, so I will write in the margins or whatever. but I will never mark up things with highlighter because it makes it impossible for me to ever understand what's on that page again. And lots of color examples also are bad for me on that, but the highlighter is just such a blow because, some people will buy a used book that's been highlighted with the thought of, wow, I'll get what other people think is important and that'll help me learn. For me, it has just made the book unusable. And this, I really, I have enough trouble with rules anyway, and that step made it almost impossible. Luckily, I can wing a lot of things in it, but it definitely increased the cost in terms of my learning ability. And, well, that's just something you face with Victory Point games, is the rules are going to have what Alan Emmerich thinks is the best way to reach the most people. But it's going to completely leave some people behind who probably were capable of handling in the hobby otherwise. They also go out of their way, though, to provide a nice player aid here with a lot of the information. And playing through, instead of trying to understand the game, if I have to look up a rule, it's really expensive in this, but playing through and following it very procedurally, you can make it through. It's just that's not the fun way for me to learn a game. Okay. Luckily, it's not too hard a game to learn. It's a real hard game to play in terms of not hard in the sense that you have these really difficult calculations or whatever. Just, man, it really hands you a nasty world. Beyond the nasty world side, do I think that there's something that you can learn from it? I don't think there's a lot you can puzzle out about it, but there may be things that you learn from through experience that's kind of a different sort of feeling. One of the things that I puzzle out, I did, but it didn't seem to help me, and we'll go forward with that. It may just be really, really tough. We crashed sometime deep into the second deck, kind of like things like Republic of Rome. This game gives you 3 decks that are divided by time period. Now those decks are kind of funny. Each one starts with a fixed card that begins the deck, and that actually gives you your victory point check. You have to make certain victory points, and if you don't get them, if you do get them or don't get them, you reach a certain point and you'll get a certain effect from that to begin the scenario. And then each deck also ends with a specific card. But the rest of the events within the time period all get shuffled together and put in the middle. The game can fail to feel correct. For example, if you've got events that are talking about, Cromwell marching up into Scotland and defeating the Scots, and you've got the Northern Army besieging London at that time, it doesn't feel right. And, you just have to say, the events are the events. They won't appropriately be caused in the way that they were historically. You're just going to draw a slice of time in what happened. And in some cases, in cases of armies, that's no big deal. But in the cases of disunity within the parliamentarian cause or something like that, that may not be likely to happen when the cause is under the most pressure. All right, let's talk about the base sequence of play and what happens. So on each turn, what you're going to, and you'll see this as we play, on each turn you're going to be drawing an event card, and you can read the flavor text. It's informative. My wife was very happy to see that. She made us read them aloud all the time. Then you have this sort of military segment here, and this one's pretty simple. It means this army is going to take an action. If we have, let's look at some others here. this sort of red symbol here with a cannon. We're going to go to a battle sequence immediately. And that'll follow this little sequence here, which we'll talk about in a moment. Each of these armies takes, when it's an army, it takes an action. And the actions generally are to push down the map. So for example, what do we got here? We've got a North Army. That would move from Area 5 to Area 4 normally. Now, it's got a sequence of different, again, this is all very procedural, but it's got a sequence of different actions that it can take. Let's see if it's listed somewhere. Here it is. So first it recovers from disorder. If it doesn't have to do that, if there's any clubmen or revolts, actually I don't think revolts count, I think only clubmen count, but I'm not sure. That would be something I'd have to look up while playing. And there's no way that I'd remember it, and it would take a significant amount of time because of all the color and crap in the rulebook. Okay, so that only happens if it's behind them, though, i.e., if they're down here, if it's here it would count, but if it's down here it wouldn't. Besieging a fortress, if they're on the same layer as the fortress, they'll start trying to remove that fortress. Now, they can't go forward in an area until they've besieged the fortress and taken control of it. The siege of the fortress, like a lot of actions in the game, is going to be handled by a roll of a die. The fortress has a little strength number. Look at these little cutout pieces here. Yeah, that's the magic of the laser printer. Huh? You can do it with other things, but it's so impressive here. Anyway, the goal for them will be to roll higher than the defense value of the fortress. That fortress has a defense value of 2, so they'd have to roll a 3 or higher. There might be modifiers, but I don't think there are many on this. If the difference between some actions and others, for the armies when they're besieging a fortress, they get to roll twice to try to take it down. If they end up capturing it, they don't roll again. They don't waste their other roll. Their next action in here is to advance. So the last thing they're kind of willing to do with their action is to move a space forward. But that's actually what they most often end up doing. All right. Then you have these events that'll tell you that your tracks are going to go up or down in certain directions. And sometimes they're a choice. Some of them will say, you may choose to institute this, and it gives you the effects for it. And then finally, another event here that gives yet another sort of effect, and in this case, some devilry. It's just you follow them one at a time and do them in order. In general, that's not... The ordering isn't that important, but, you know, sometimes it does come into play. The tracks are kind of interesting. There's a neat flavoring between them. First of all, when you reach the edge of some of these tracks, it's possible your counter will flip, and that's what this symbol here means. And then it indicates an effect here. So place morale marker on Ireland Army. The morale marker in that case would be the -1 strength, which would go here, and that would reduce the strength there. A couple of the tracks are linked in the sense that, well, first of all, this is the political track, which is going to be Parliament and the monarchy, and Catholicism and Puritanism is the religious track. So those have a certain shared value to them. Only one piece can be in these two spaces. And so if this piece was here and I was instructed to raise up, instead of that, it bumps this one out. Starting locations are marked with those little circles. You'll see a lot of triangles on the board. Reds, blues. Well, the red triangles are bad victory points. They're negative victory points. The blue ones are positive victory points. Likewise, control of these fortresses. If you control it, you get the good. If you don't control it, you get the bad. Things like the deviltry produce a penalty. Uprisings produce a penalty. Armies on certain status, for example, a disorganized army gives a bonus to you. That doesn't matter too much until either the end of the game or at the end of any given deck. At the end of a deck, you get assessed for how well you did during that deck, and you might get some little bonus off that. Somewhat more important is not losing the game. You lose the game if you get 4 of your markers in the F area. Now, there's one other way to lose the game, which is if you lose London. If either of these are in effect at the end of your turn, at the end of the turn, after all the card and then your own actions take place, well, it's time to clean up. And it's pretty easy to actually get there. The game seems to indicate that, at least for me, the game seems to indicate that you'll probably be able to survive the game, but you probably won't win for a while. Well, we had trouble surviving it even, which is fine. So there was something else about track movement I wanted to talk about, and then I lost track of my track movement. Ah, yes. It's possible that a track ends up being instructed to move further in a direction than it can possibly go. So, for example, you're already up here and you're instructed to go further up. Well, in that case, the opposite track from it is affected. So, for example, if Ireland is all the way up here, it would be flipped over in that case, and goes up. Instead, Scotland goes up. And that's to indicate the relationship between Irish and Scottish military endeavors and political actions. It's much clearer when you're talking the monarchy and the parliament, etc. So up is always good for the player, down is always bad for the player. And you'll see the rankings here. You've got your A grade, your B grade, your C grade. Those are kind of important. There are some events that are going to affect that political something, religious something. Let's look. Reactions, which kind of serve to smooth the ratings out if you've gotten yourself boosted too high or if you've fallen too low. And we had both happen in our game, but we kind of got trashed by these. If they lower your ratings significantly, and if your ratings are already low or high, they'll tend towards the middle. So what happened to us was we were up at the high end of the chart in a lot of things and ended up getting smashed in those. And then bad cards came out in a bad battle, etc. and this, that, and the other. Okay. So on your own turn, you get a sequence of things that you're allowed to take care of. First of all, at the beginning of the turn, before the card even flips, you collect an amount of Zeal. Your Zeal is going to be equal to 3 points for London plus 1 point for each English town or fortress that you hold. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to be pulling in 5 Zeal. It is possible to get additional Zeal. For example, up here, you get an extra Zeal per turn. If you've ruined Catholicism as much as possible, that could end up being minus a Zeal per turn if Puritanism's been ruined as much as possible, which of course you're not trying to do. And during your player actions, you basically spend a Zeal to do something. Now, one of those somethings, and you can do this, is to spend to get a +1 die roll modifier. So I could spend a Zeal and throw a die roll modifier over there, and that'll improve my chances of upgrading that track throughout the turn. It'll get cleared away at the end of the turn. And there are other events that show up, and I'll show these little markers into play. These are die roll modifiers. Those are strength. That can affect my chances of doing something against a particular track or a particular army or even a fort, I guess. Okay. Now, that's one of the options that's available, and in fact, in the optional rules, they make this a little bit less potent than it is, but most of the optional rules reduce your chance of winning. So if you do get a pattern down that works, I think you can make the game a little harsher that way. Another thing this could be used for is during a battle you're allowed to spend Zeal. Battles actually happen as the first thing in the turn, but I didn't want to get to them because they're really outside the pale of the normal play of the game. Kind of like this, which is beyond the pale. Okay, so that's something you can do, and often your turn's plan will involve first slapping down that +1 and then concentrating on something. Other things you can do is purchase an available achievement card. I haven't shown you any of these. Here's one. So these cards basically have a set of prerequisites. And these, mostly they're usually where you are on a chart, like Parliament greater than or equal to B rating on there. But this also says Charles has to be beheaded. London's defense, I guess, has to be greater than or equal to 3. It's going to cost you a certain amount of Zeal to pick it up. And then when you do, you get an event here, or a bonus effect, and you also get some victory points. Those are generally the way that you win the game, from what I understand, which is that you're not going to have a lot of victory points at the end of the game unless you're able to buy a decent number of those. We found it very difficult. We got one bought. We'll see how this works when I do the playthrough of this on video. Whether I've learned anything from my first foray. Now those guys, they get drawn from the deck, and normally you'll be drawing an event card and you just play that event, this series of events out, and then you play your turn. If you draw one of those cards, it goes up here into the available achievements, and then you keep drawing until you get an event. You have a limit, you're only allowed 3 of these, and this thing here is just a hole to show you where the battle happened. It doesn't have any effect on play. Once there are 3 there, if you draw another one, you have to throw one of these 3 out into the discard pile. So you'll often be making decisions, geez, that one's just out of reach right now. We'll never get that anytime soon, stuff like that. All right. Oh, where are we? So, yeah. Things you can do with your Zeal. You can campaign against an enemy army or devilry unit. Okay, campaigning against an army, you simply declare the army, and you're going to try to roll higher than its strength. Everything's always roll higher than a certain number. There might be modifiers on it. It might be, flipped over so that it's disorganized, although that would be kind of iffy in terms of why you'd want to attack it there. If you succeed in attacking it, you push it back 1 level. So if it was at the 1, it would go back to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5 as you go. Once it's at the final box, if you hit it again, you disorder it. You can't do any more damage to it than that. It'll always have some residual existence, and it'll come back into play again and again as cards come up. But the further back you can keep them from your fortresses, the better off you are. That's something you don't want to do. You don't want to lose your fortresses. Like with campaigning against armies, you can also campaign against devilry units. You don't need any particular requirement to hit them. There are some requirements towards campaigning against armies. Basically, if there's a revolt or clubman out, you can't do anything in the region they're in. You can't attack armies, you can't besiege fortresses until you've dealt with them. However, it is possible that your enemy, the system itself, will end up dealing with them if they end up behind their lines. That becomes one of their top goals. If you look here, it's the second one here. But I think it's only against clubmen, if that's an issue. Okay. You can besiege an enemy fortress or revolt marker. Okay. So, for besieging, remember the enemy got 2 dice when he does it? You don't. You get 1. And you're trying to beat, again, roll higher than the defensive value. So if I went for Oxford, I'd need to roll a 5. I could, of course, have thrown Zeal against Oxford and be able to roll it more often. There is actually a restriction against besieging, though. You cannot besiege if the enemy army is in the area unless it's disrupted, and you can't besiege if it's past the area. So, for example, if this army was here, I couldn't besiege Hull. I think that's correct. I would have to look that up if I end up in a situation where the army's, disrupted in the space. I will be looking that kind of thing up, and it'll have a high expense because of the way the rules are presented visually. Okay, hopefully I won't do it on video too many times. What else do we have here? You're allowed to fortify your own fortresses. You just boost the value by 1 for each zeal you spend on that. And that makes things more defensible. You might have restrictions. Oh, I wanted to talk about the restriction. But in top of everything else, you're not allowed to besiege Oxford until certain cards come up. There's certain cards that have to come up before you're even given the right to besiege Oxford. It's not really seen as that enemy at the point, which means for the beginning of the game, you're only going to have 3, 4, 5 zeal most turns. Eventually, that can go up to 6 once you have Oxford. You don't get anything for that crap. Okay. You can engage in politics, which works. You pick one of these locations and you roll against the target number. Again, you have to beat that number, so I'd have to roll higher than a 3 to try to move it 1 in my direction. If I fail, well, I lose a zeal. I lose the zeal that I spent to do it. In some cases, though, you can't. So, for example, down here, in these 3 spaces, there's no number to push forward. Now, I'm not sure why there's a number up here, because you can't there either. So that kind of disturbs me. But it is, it almost looks like the charts, maybe I'm misreading the game. Maybe the target number is the next space up. That would make sense. Yeah. Okay, so we get to flip through this. And I do this with everything, but here it comes to me as a blur. So what I'm looking at least there's a table of contents here. Yeah, that's not going to help me. Guess it'll be action phase. Okay. And what I'm doing is politics. Let's see if I can see that word. I'm trying. Unfortunately, the paper reacts worse to spit coffee than most things do. Okay, I think it's here. I can barely see this stuff just because of the color. Yeah, it is the box you're trying to go up to. So I've always been playing this wrong, and we got hosed because we couldn't move anything. Okay, so that actually is a definite thing. So you're going to be rolling against the number that you're trying, the space you're trying to get to. So you don't have to actually lift the thing up. You can just say, I need a 3. I need to beat a 3 to get up there. Okay. Well, that made things a little harder, there's no question. And let's see what else we have here. You could declare desperate times, which I forget what it is, and we probably should have done that too. That might have helped us save our bacon. Desperate times. You can lower Parliament or Puritan markers by a box and get an extra zeal. And there's also options to do that with Ireland and Scotland if you control the fortresses. Then at the end of the turn, if you don't have London or you have 4 or more F grades, you lose the game. Otherwise, well, you clean up all the little markers that you place. Now, let's talk a little bit about battle, because this is kind of a different thing. So what's going to happen in battle is when the battle happens, you basically randomly select a couple of cav units for the wings, and a bunch of pike for the center. And the same happens here. Some units are named, and these are kicking around down here. Unfortunately, as the parliamentarian side, you don't have any named units at the beginning of the game. You got to get them from events. All the royalist name units are in the game at the beginning, though. Those named units tend to be stronger, although they're not guaranteed to be. Then what happens is all the counters are flipped over. Some of unnamed ones will have events on them. You draw these events. Some of the events are red, and they just take automatic effect. Some of them are green, and they give you an opportunity that you can use during that or another later battle. You can hold on to them and use them as you need. And what you're going to have is numbers facing each other. I don't want to flip one of these over. They look very much like these. So you're going to have cav versus cav fighting. You're going to be fighting out these different rounds, first, second, third, and fourth. Cav versus cav fights. You add the amount of strength on the units to a die roll. And if one person is 2 or more greater than the other person, they've won. So in the case of if you roll 2 pips higher than the other person, including the modifier for the strength here, you move your piece into the victory space. There's one exception to that, which was with Cromwell. He has the ability with his cav to come around and affect the next battle, the field, the ground, the infantry battle. Okay. Then you go to the second, do the same roll. If you end up within one of each other, you put your blue piece in the draw space. If you end up winning against a named red unit, it goes into here, the defeat box. If you yourself lose, i.e. end up 2 worse than the royalist combination, you end up in the defeated box. We'll get to that in a moment. After you compare all the values on all of these and roll them out, you're only moving the blue pieces anywhere except the defeat box, and only named red units go in there because they have a chance of dying. There is a special case, which is Cromwell. If he wins his battle, he flips over instead and provides +3 strength to the infantry battle next to him, the musket and pike side of it. And then he'll still go in the victory box after that battle is resolved, no matter what happens. So your goal is to get the most of your pieces that you can into the victory box. If you get 3 or more pieces in there, if you get the majority of pieces, so each box is assessed, and the box that has the largest let's do this right. If one box has the majority, that box is what is the effect for the battle. If that's not the case, it's the box with the most in it, but you're allowed to avoid a defeat by dropping counters from the victory to the draw box. So basically, you're only defeated if the majority of the pieces are in the defeat box. If there's a tie among boxes, it ends up a draw. So whatever happens, if there's a tie in the total amount. Okay. Each of these has an effect. So if you draw, you just lose a point of zeal. If you're defeated, the affected army unit gets a +1 strength marker on it. You have to decide at the beginning of the battle whether you're attacking the North or the West Army. Those are the only ones you're allowed to attack, no matter where the battle seems to occur. Sometimes it seems like it's occurring in Scotland, according to the discussion or whatever. Well, you don't have that option. Anyway, if you're defeated, you also lose a point of zeal, and your monarchy track goes down. That doesn't mean the monarchy is getting weaker. It means it's getting stronger. However, if you get a victory, you're going to get a certain number of BPs, bonus points, something or another. I don't know. It means something else, but I'm going to call them bonus points, battle points probably. You get an amount equal to the number of pieces above 3 that you have in the victory box. So if you get all 6 of your pieces in the victory box, you get 3 of these bonus points in your hand. There are cards that can affect that. You also, before you resolve the bonus points, each unit is going to roll on this little table for a chance of being each named unit for a chance of being permanently killed, in which is just removed from the game, or possibly, this is my wife's doing, possibly put in this recovery box where that person misses the next, or that unit misses the next battle, or no effect at all, and you're available at for the next battle no matter what. Okay. What about the BPs? Somewhere. There it is. It tells you what you can expend them on. So 1 BP can get you a Zeal point. 2 BPs allow you to adjust a political track upward or move a fortress in your direction. I don't think you're allowed to capture one that way. 2 could also be used to put a -1 strength on the army. And 3 could put a -2 strength on the army. Now, this is the army that you chose at the beginning of the battle. In addition, I believe the army is disrupted, which weakens its strength, and also means the next time it takes an action, the first thing it does is recovers from the disorder. I think that's covered most of the base rules of the game. We'll see, the little things that I didn't want to explain maybe because I don't want to have to look them up, because I know I will forget them. I know that they will not stick and I will not be able to find them easily in the rules. No matter how many times I go through the rules, no matter how many times I look them up. And that's just a factor of the way these rules are presented. It may work for some people, but it sure to hell don't work for me to have this much graphical. I have trouble with small amounts of graphics. Like if this was just text columns with these colored pictures in it, that would be distracting. But this is like, this is like throw a siren in front of me while I'm trying to read. I just cannot, I can't read this way. I wish they made, I wish they had kind of an option, but obviously they can only print things one way. And this is the only company that I know that does this, but apparently they believe that it helps people learn or something. All it does to me is makes me drool. It's shown. No, that was spitting coffee accidentally. Something funny happened. All right, let's send this one up and we'll get playing.